Policy and Planning for Community, and I'm here with Grant Kettle, Planning and Guidance Unit Manager. In November 2021, we received 2 applications from Ian McMichael, who spoke earlier today. One to change the name of Von Tempsky Street to Putikitiki Street, and one to change the name of Dawson Park to Te Wehenga Park. The applications were made on the grounds of cultural sensitivity, and the applications note that while there are many street names, plaques and other commemorations to Pākehā, there's not really anything in that area that celebrates Māori or recognises the significance of the places to Māori. So following a briefing on December 2021, staff progressed the application as per the naming of roads, open spaces and council facilities policy, and at the direction of elected members. Consultation for the 2 applications is outlined on page 94 of the report, or of the agenda, I should say. Controversy around Von Tempsky, Gustavus Von Tempsky, has been widely discussed. Information about him is specifically included on page 28 of the attachment, Historical Reports on Hamilton Street Names by Dr. Vincent O'Malley. A little less is known about Captain Dawson, besides he was a mayor and a publican. He was a mayor for a few months, but he was a publican in Hamilton, Kirikiriroa. Although we do know that while the street was named after him, the reserve was just named that because it was on the street. So it was an operational name given when the land was around early to mid-90s. So pages 96 and 97 outline the considerations made by staff when we're forming the recommendations to approve the 2 applications, noting this would help reduce the imbalance of Māori names to the area, and to improve staff to carry out some work around ensuring that interpretation for the area, like inclusive storytelling, similar to what we've proposed for Beale Cottage, was carried out for the area to tell the stories in a wider context. Staff recommendations support the outcomes of He Pau Manawa Ora, and particularly ensuring that the city's history, local identity and local culture is recognised and celebrated. Just wanted to note too that dual names for streets would be contrary to the policy, so a dual name for Von Tempsky and would not meet the national standards for road naming either.
Okay. Grant, is there anything to add before I contextualise?
Just in terms of, I suppose, just turning back to the previous question in the open session this morning, there's a question regarding the Waikato Tainoi's position in regards to the policy. I think my comment on that would be Tukarangi Morgan adequately summed up the position of Waikato Tainui when they're saying that he supports the change from Von Tempsky to Putikitiki Street, and that is the position of the tribe.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Acknowledging they wrote the report inaccurately or there was a mistake? Yeah, that's the question.
So let me deal with that point then. So off the back of the briefing and this table, I think last month, one of the questions that arose at that particular briefing was around a comment that was potentially made at the Joint Management Committee between Waikato Tainui and the Council regarding dual naming. The clarity was sought by me and direction to me to seek direction from Waikato Tainui in regards to that. It was very clear from the communications from Waikato Tainui to me was that their preference and their support is the support to change to Putikitiki Street from Von Tempsky. That was their first preference. If in the event that Council couldn't get that over the line, they also said that they would support a dual naming at that point, and that's what's been accurately reflected in the report. But clearly their position in the communications to me, and you heard this morning, was that they support the change.
All right, so for clarification if I can, so in fact page 94.31 is correct.
Correct.
You did speak to them and they did say if Council did choose to, that they would support that.
Yeah. Yes, they did, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll come back to that because I've got a couple of comments on that. But Councillor Angela's had her finger on the button for a little bit. If I may just contextualise this, so this is about Von Tempsky Street. This is not the street renaming policy, which is later on. So this is about, and this has come through as a part of the process, and we're here to make a decision as a part of that process. So, Councillor Angela.
Thanks, Chair Mark. So, thank you for saying that. The purpose of a policy is to provide a process for us for these decisions. What would we have to, and that's all I'm interested in, is the process today. What do we have to do in terms of a decision to operate outside of a council policy? If we had to do that. It's not quite as strict as a bylaw, but I need to understand.
Good question.
My understanding is that council is able to make decisions outside of the policy. However, you're guided and directed by your own policy. So
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure in terms of what the process would then look like in terms of operate outside of that.
Yeah, okay. I'm looking for an expert on that, but no, I
My
think
suggestion
it
would be
might,
it would
I
come through
think
a
to operate,
recommendation.
I think to operate outside of a policy has to be a 75% decision of council. Maybe governance can just check that. So just a few, and you'll understand why I'm concerned about that. So the required criteria to meet under the policy is, and I questioned Ian this morning in the public forum, is 90% of properties need to, in the location, need to support. Is that right?
No, that's not correct.
It's not correct.
No, it's not. So that's one of the criterion that could apply in the case. I'm just
Council-
going to try to. I'll just direct you to that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Could apply.
It's on page 105 and it's 16.
Yep,
It's
yep.
council will consider and determine.
There's 16 A, B, C, and D.
Yep.
One of which could apply. For example,
Okay.
if 90% of Von Tempsky Street supported a name change, that would be
Yep.
one of the reasons for council to consider this recommendation. Another reason would be for issues of cultural sensitivity.
Okay,
the
so-
application has been made under.
So it can be,
16B.
it's just not clear to me that
Yeah,
it can be
yeah.
one of those things.
Is it or
It's
and?
all- they're all-
It doesn't
all-
say any of that. It just says originated due to the following.
Yep,
A, B, C, D. Okay, so it's one of those things.
that's correct.
Okay, okay, all right. Yep, I get that. All right, so there are 28 properties. We, under the policy, we write to them, and we got back, and I'm working on the principle of one property, one response, because I think it was Te Kohai Health, no, not them, someone else, that had 3 responses. So if we go 1, so there are 20 properties that, and there were only 3 against, there were 20 properties that didn't contact us. Did we go back to them at all? Did we door knock or?
No, we didn't.
We didn't.
No, didn't. We
Okay.
just followed the policy, and I think
Okay,
it was.
that's,
We briefed that was foreshadowed at the briefing in December in terms of how council wishes us to undertake our consultation around
Yeah.
this policy, and we were very clear on that. I would say that we also wouldn't have precluded any submissions or comments made by any of those owners or occupiers outside of that submission process had they chosen to do so.
yeah, okay. One of the other things in the policy says that the costs are to be incurred by the applicant. There's a fee, isn't there, to put in an application to council, and has that fee been paid?
It has.
That has been paid, okay.
It's a deposit.
And then it also says about meeting all costs relating to, so surely that wouldn't mean that the applicant has to pay for the change of the street name, the change of business, printed collateral and all of that as well?
So the cost to the applicant would be for the process, so staff time and processing the application, in terms of the cost of the mail out, the costs of staff time associated with that, and costs associated with the signs itself.
So the actual street sign, the applicant
Correct.
has to cover?
Correct.
Has to pay for? Does the applicant know that?
The applicant is aware of the deposit which they've paid. They're aware that these are actual and reasonable costs associated with that. My understanding is the applicant is aware of that.
Okay, and just off the top of your head, Grant, how much is a street sign?
$250.
Oh, okay, I suppose it's not too bad.
People nick them.
And, okay, so just 100% clarity that, because Ian himself talked about a 90%, but he was talking about something quite
That's right.
general, I think.
Geographical.
That's right.
He was, he was being very creative with his 90%, because I worked out on, if that was the case, on the support, he only got 17%. But that doesn't matter, okay. So, and I think, because this process is coming under the current policy,
Yes.
not the one we are going to be talking about, okay. That's it, thank you. Thanks for clearing that.
Thank you. Great questions. Really good questions. Mangai Te Pora.
Just want to be clear about the dual name, because you're saying we cleared up the issue of Waikato Tainui support, dual names. On one hand, we're talking about dual names as in Pūtikitiki Street and then the translation of that. We're not
It could
talking
be.
about Pūtikitiki
Von Tempsky.
/ Von Tempsky.
It could be either.
Okay,
It
so
could be
Waikato Tainui
one
will
or the
support
other.
that. Well, I just need us to be clear that we don't support Pūtikitiki Street / Von Tempsky. The support would be for Pūtikitiki, the interpretation
yeah,
of that. I really just wanted to provide that, that clarity, Mark.
That's great.
and
That's
to
really helpful.
Get the understanding there. Yeah, that's my question for now.
Tūnapoi, do you agree? Thank you.
So in terms of, just for clarifying, sorry, in terms of whether it's Von Tempsky / Pūtikitiki Street, so in terms of the policy, that would fail in my view in terms of the policy and the standard, as
Yeah.
would Von Tempsky
Yeah.
and transliteration
Yeah.
of Von Tempsky would also fail the policy and the New Zealand standard. So what I'm saying in terms of that, they would both fail that policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to correct the narrative
Yes.
that we Waikato Tainui would support
a translation.
a translation
Yes,
or
yeah.
dual, ahakoa, the standard in there. Yeah.
Yeah, dual language rather than two different. Yep, I understand. Thank you. All right, Councillor Pascoe.
I take it that Mr McMichael is the applicant of both applications, and they were separate applications.
Correct.
Yep. Did he wish to change the name of Dawson Street with Dawson Park?
My understanding is he didn't, and that wasn't in the application.
And you don't know what his reason was for not wanting to do that?
I don't, no.
Okay.
Because the name of Dawson doesn't have the same cultural sensitivity as Von Tempsky does, and his driver is to create a balance of telling the story of both. We've got some European storytelling in that area, so it was about addressing that balance. So retaining Dawson Street, you've still got Dawson Street,
Yep.
and just renaming the park.
Okay.
Yeah.
So apart from the O'Malley report, no other work has been done to validate the actions and activities of Von Tempsky. What I'm saying, we're really relying on the views of one historian.
The body of evidence that supports the application is correct, as comes from the Vincent O'Malley report. But what I would say to that is that the narrative, the kōrero from Ngāti Wairere, from Thorpe, from Waikato Tainui, and others, including kaumātua that I've personally been witness from Maniapoto, from Raukawa, from Waikato Tainui, and various other forums, is very consistent, if not exactly the same, as the kōrero and the information provided within the Vincent O'Malley report. So whilst the application draws heavily and relies upon the O'Malley report, I've personally witnessed firsthand very emotional kōrero from senior kaumātua of those three iwi, of which some are now not here, who would be very consistent with that report. So the application, in answer to your question, the application does rely on the O'Malley report.
Okay. And the last question is around the cost. You've indicated it's about $4,000 in paragraph 51, I think it is. And we've collected, if my arithmetic is right, we've collected 2 lots of about $800 from the applicant. Is that?
That $4,000 refers to the renaming of the park, not the street. So if council chooses by resolution to change the
Oh, I
name of a
see.
park, then
Yep.
we cover the cost of that, and that's about the cost of a sort of standard interpretation sign. Currently, there's no signage on the park at all. so-
Right, okay, so what about Von Tempsky Street?
Yeah.
Is there a cost to that which,
Yeah, so there's, my understanding is there's 4 signs on Vintemsky Street. I'm
Yep.
assuming there's 2 at each end. They cost $250 each, so total cost of $1,000 in terms of
Okay,
the physical costs of changing the sign.
and are you aware of any risks that we might have from residents or property owners in that street who might seek some compensation from us or the applicant to fund the costs of whatever they need to do for the street name change?
I'm not aware of any risks in that regard. In
Have
fact,
we had any precedent from other street name changes that we've done in the past where council have been asked to meet, or the applicant has been asked to meet the cost?
I'm not aware of that. In my experience of time in council, I'm not aware, but there may be.
Okay. And last question, very last question. Are you sensing any risk that if we approve the name change, particularly the Von Tempsky street name change, that we will receive within a medium period of time applications to change other street names where there's cultural sensitivity? And I'm thinking here of, Bryce Street is mentioned in the O'Malley report, but there's also Grey Street, there's Heafy Terrace. Those are a couple that I'm aware of in that area, but I guess there's half of Hamilton East, which most of those streets were named after the militia who arrived for the Waikato Wars in the 1860s.
Yeah, I'm not really in a position to answer that. I don't know. No one's approached me directly in regards to any other.
I guess the answer, yeah, are you aware, that's all, whether or not there are other applications that are either in the wings or contemplated?
I'm not aware, no.
Okay.
Okay.
How would we manage those? Heafy Terrace, Grey Street, hugely long streets.
I think it'd be fair to say, I'll make this comment, is that would be the process for managing a change, for example, to Grey Street, maybe go through a slightly different process than the one that we're currently going for, and purely because of the number of residents, the number of businesses, the size of a street of that size.
Okay.
So the process you may wish to adopt might be different, and it would be able to be accommodated.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
Chair.
Rob.
Thanks.
Councillor Kesh.
You. Just a follow-on question from both of these guys about the costings. The residents who are in favour of the change, have there been conversations with them about them having to pay for the change? As in, the hospital, the midwife, the River Ridge, the cost that they'll have to face in terms of, all of their collateral having been changed.
We haven't had direct conversations with those that submitted in support of the application.
So is that bad? Is that bad? I mean, what if this goes through and then they come back going, you guys changed the name, so pay for it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any indication in the policy that they know what they're getting themselves into. One thing we did was very transparent in terms of how we went out for the submission process. We provided all the information provided from the applicants. We provided the council policy, so they were making submissions in the context of the council policy. So we provided that to each of the owners and the occupiers. We provided them all the information that they had. So they had a full set of information in which to make their submissions. I don't think, and I'm happy to be corrected on this point, but in terms of the submissions that we received, I don't think there was any commentary from any of the submitters supporting the application that costs or the cost of their business cards, etc., was an impediment to them.
Yeah, okay. That's good, as long as they are aware that there is a cost if it were to change. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Kesh. Yeah, that does, Mayor Paula, if I might just jump in on that one. With regards to the waypoint signage and the consultation and the fact that this is, it's reasonably groundbreaking, what we're looking at doing, are you satisfied that the policy is going to be enough? Probably more question to you, Helen, I think, and Joe, because on policy, it's all fine, well, potentially, but are we doing enough politically to make sure that this doesn't, signage-wise, are we taking every measure, basically? Are we turning over every stone?
In terms of the signage and interpretation, we would definitely go to, and engage with people in that area, in the school and the businesses, so we'd continue to have those conversations and work through that. We certainly wouldn't want to be doing the interpretation and signage in isolation without bringing everyone along on the journey.
In fact, the recommendation currently on the table is that there would be a comprehensive interpretation material and a comms plan that would support the rollout of this, and that's part of the recommendation.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to tease out. Thank you, Mayor Paula. I appreciate that. You're up, Mayor Paula.
Just want to be clear, the process that Ian, because I'm a bit confused now with some of the other questions, Ian McMichael followed, and staff, because I know that you worked very closely over 8-9 months or so to develop this. The process that Ian followed was exactly by the book. He did everything he was required to do to make this application, and he paid for it, right?
Correct.
Right, so there aren't any flaws in his application or the information that we might have required from him?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay,
We accepted the application, he paid the deposit fee, he met the criteria, we processed it as per the policy.
And in terms of the consultation, just a bit confused between who should do it. He's the applicant.
Yeah.
He did
Yeah.
it. He has provided evidence, written evidence around the people that he visited and their response. He's been honest about the three, right? The three residents that didn't support it, and
Not-
he's
Not quite. So the application had a number of, I'm assuming residents or business owners that supported the application, so that was presented to council.
yeah.
That was included within this. We then, as staff, then went out to all of the residents and the occupiers of Von Tempsky Street again,
Yeah.
and then asked them for submissions on that particular application.
Right.
So the
And
three
after
that
that,
you
you
of the
became a-
three,
Yeah.
the three are from the formal submission process.
Because I was at an event where Te Koha Health opened their new facility and did meet with all of the medical personnel along there, the hospital, the radiology and everything, who were very, very much behind Ian and his endeavour in here. What was the reason for the three not to be supportive? Did they give any feedback, or they just said blank no? I'm just interested.
Good question, Mayor Paul. I'll just refer you to the part of I'll just go to myself, but effectively, if I recall it, again, I'm happy to be corrected on this, really it was around, one, they didn't feel like the need to make change, the history is history, therefore we shouldn't be tinkering with that. They did cast some aspersions around whether the Vincent O'Malley report was accurate, or whether it was one-sided. I think it was partly part of that. And I think they raised questions, and again, I'm happy to be corrected on this point, but from my memory, they raised questions about whether council should be spending funds on road naming, renaming applications.
Grant, didn't
Words
you
to that
mention at
effect.
one point that someone actually had a relative who had fought alongside the Von Tempsky?
Yeah, so I understand that one of the submitters, and I can, had some connections, I understand, again, please, I'm just referring to what I remember from the submission. was in relation to armed forces, military, had some connections in regards to that. So I think there was a slight connection there. I think they documented that out in his submission, which is contained within your agenda pack as well. So
Yeah.
I just need to find it. I'm just
In,
trying to find
in
it.
terms of the historic accuracy in the O'Malley report versus the verbal and written other submissions that we've had from Ngāti Wairere, Thorpe, Waikato Tainui, etc., it's reasonably, I don't want to be leading about this, is it fair to say it's reasonably widely accepted that Von Temsky causes a deep cultural offence to Waikato Tainui for some of the acts during the land war? That it, I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to say was the O'Malley report was one piece, but it wasn't the only piece that said to us Mr. Von Temsky was a violent man who caused harm to Māori.
The only way I can answer that, Mayor Paula, is by saying, in
not trying
previous
to be-
roles, I've been, the kōrero in terms of what's been presented in the O'Malley report is very consistent with what I've heard from Māori.
So we've been
Waikato
given
and
no
others.
reason, no
Not in
tangible reason to doubt the accuracy of the O'Malley report.
Correct.
Right, thank you. Thank you, thanks.
Nope, that was worth digging around, thank you. Pangai Tua.
Thanks, Chair. My question was similar to Mayor Paula's. It was historians was telling me that good research is littered with footnotes, and it seems to me that the O'Malley research has a footnote for every single sentence. To me, I would say there's a veracity in that research. Is that your view, Grant?
I'm
Yeah, I'm asking a question as we part of my impassioned
only
debate.
comment was-
But I note also that Von Temsky is also a reference in O'Malley's research, some of Von Temsky's memoranda.
Yeah,
Question.
I can't really comment in terms from the historic side of things.
Yeah, we're asking our policy guy to be a historian, I think.
O'Malley
but-
does draw on a number of references
does.
to inform his report. In answer to your question? Yeah. So it's well referenced.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Alan?
The flick of the eyebrows was impressive. Wish I could do that. All right, thank you, Ollie. You finished there, Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, look, I'm going to go over some ground that my good friend Councillor Rob went over. I just want clarity. What's the deposit Ian has exactly paid?
I understand he's paid the deposit, which is $880.
880. So that, I understand, is just for Von Temsky, as there's no deposit for the change
That's correct.
for the park.
Correct.
Okay, so we're just dealing with one payment. Thanks.
I thought the answer I got was that he paid twice for two
And I
applications.
just wanted to clarify that for you, Rob.
Thank
So
you.
there is no cost in regards to the naming or renaming of a park.
We don't charge
We don't
an
charge.
admin fee or any fee for applications for park names.
In Councillor Rob's defence, he did say, can you confirm that he's paid 2 lots of fees of $880? And everybody went, And what we're now told is, it's 1 lot. Okay, so we've clarified that. So he's paid a deposit, and irrespective of the result today, if in fact it is agreed that the name is renamed, before it's renamed, he will have to pay the balance. Is that correct?
Yeah, he'll pay, there's the actual reasonable cost associated with the processing of the application.
Okay, and that is the $1,000 for the signs, the mail out to each of the households, and I think from your own words, staff time allocated. So how many hours now are we in?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you. So we would put.
Would you
the-
estimate it to be 40 hours of staff time over the last couple of months?
No.
No?
So it would be actual reasonable cost, so essentially the cost of Mark Ewington preparing the report for council, which is in front of you today, alongside Joanna. Without doing sums, there'll be a few hours there. There'll be some admin, business support time in terms of putting together the list of and things. So I'm not sure. I can't answer the question because I haven't added up the costs of doing so. But the principle is the applicant paid actual and reasonable costs associated with the application.
Sure. Please don't think I'm trying to be tricky.
It's a reasonable question.
I'm simply asking for clarity. I'm simply trying to understand what amount of money is Ian going to have to pay. I don't think it's unreasonable. So could you just tell me the amount of money he's going to have to pay, and then tell me what he's paid?
So what I can tell you is he's paid $880 as a deposit.
Yep.
What I keep saying is he will have to pay actual reasonable costs. I don't know what they are at this point. However, it's likely to be probably an extra $1,000, maybe more.
Right, okay. So he might get a bill for $1,000 at least. Okay, great. Can you confirm to me that nothing happens until that money is spent, until he's sent us the cheque for the extra $1,000?
Nothing happens in terms of,
As in, we don't do the signs and we don't actually do the name change until he's paid the $1,000.
if that's the will of council, we can do that. I mean, we will be sending him an
No, look,
invoice for the actual reasonable costs associated with this, so.
Okay, I'm
Whether
sorry,
that's-
I'm simply asking, you've made mention of our policy, and so I'm going to rely on that. What does our policy say?
So the cost associated,
With regards to the timing of the payment.
yeah, it doesn't have any, it's silent.
Right, so it's not a very good policy.
It's the same policy we apply for all of our applications in regards to planning guidance, in the sense that if we make a decision, whatever that decision is, that decision then stands. We then invoice as appropriately, or in terms of subdivision, land use consents, the same policy would apply to this in regards to this. So we would expect that the applicant pays the bill, if that's what you're asking, in the sense that we will follow up and make sure that the bill is paid, as we would do with any other application.
Okay, so you wouldn't be uncomfortable, because I understand we're going to discuss the new policy very soon as a later item, that we could actually remove that ambiguity, that we could, as an organisation, like every other trading organisation, actually require full payment before we implement something. We could do that, could we not?
You could.
Okay, thank you. Expand on your understanding of the reasons why we cannot have two street names. So you're saying that not only is it contrary to our current policy, are you saying that in fact that's ultra vires, that there's a piece of legislation nationally that makes a decision of council to have a street named, two names, illegal?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying it's ultra-virus.
So there's nothing currently that would stop this council if one chose to do two names for this street?
Yep, except the point you would be stepping away from your own policy and that of the standard for road naming policy. And the reason that there is a standard for road naming is largely around emergency services, avoiding confusion, making things simple. There is a national standard within Australia and New Zealand that sort of sets the obligations on local authorities about how they do that. The policy, my understanding, responds to that national standard. The policy says, it's quite clear in terms of what a road name should look like, and that's what's set out there. So from a staff perspective, in terms of giving you advice, in terms of that, I'm giving you advice, how you then should make that decision.
And I think it would also just be prudent to take into consideration the reasons for the change. So if cultural sensitivity was one of those reasons, then would you include that name alongside a new name change?
So thank you for that. So in light of the commentary you've just provided, which is really interesting about emergency services, I think I've heard you say today that the park, Dawson Park, actually isn't named Dawson Park. So we have a park that doesn't have a name, so if there was an emergency call out, where would the emergency services go to?
It has a name by custom. What it doesn't have is never been officially named by council as Dawson Park.
Right.
But
So
it's
do we have
known
other
as-
parks like that in the city?
Yes.
Right, so we have lots of city parks that don't have names. So how would emergency services respond to that?
By custom, so it's known as Dawson Park or Dawson Reserve, or we'd say the park on the corner of Dawson Street.
Right, okay, thank you.
Grant, can I ask further than that question, we're talking street names, with a dual name,
Yes.
right? Whereas a park or a maunga, can have two names, all right? It's quite a different thing,
Yes,
isn't
it is, yes, my
Yes.
understanding is.
So we're just talking about street names?
my understanding
In regards to that, okay.
Procedural question for you, Mr Chair.
Sure.
Are you intending to put the change of the park separate to the change of Von Tempsky?
I can.
Good,
Yeah,
thank
okay,
you, that would be
absolutely.
helpful. And I'm foreshadowing an amendment in regards to Von Tempsky,
Okay.
which will be that it's named both Van Tempsky and the alternative name put forward.
Yeah,
here.
we'll have to check. There is a motion being floored by
Oh.
Sarah, who is either very invisible. Oh, there she is.
She's in yellow, that stands out.
Sarah, excuse me. I'm sorry. Ewan's just asked a question about separating Von Tempsky from Dawson and moving them separately. Would that work with what you've got in mind for you? We'd vote separately on them, or two motions, yeah. Is that what you're after, Ewan?
Well, Te Pora is, Te Pora is moving it.
Oh,
so
okay.
we need to check with her.
All right, sorry, I thought you were moving.
But as second, I am fine with breaking the two.
To Porter?
Uh,
Ewan's just asking the question about separating the motions, Von Tempsky and Dawson, voting on them separately because he's foreshadowing an amendment towards Von Tempsky.
So, one part of the, one motion would be
Von Tempsky,
Von Tempsky,
The other
and
would be
then the
Dawson.
other would be for
Dawson Park.
Dawson Park.
Henniger Park.
So it's really in your hands.
Yeah,
Just
just
voting on
voting them
separately.
separately.
Yeah, I'm fine with that if you are Te Pora.
What would the reason that we would separate them out?
Well, actually, maybe governance, could you provide a normal process etiquette for this matter? I mean, what you're doing, if you wouldn't be willing, and it would be highly unusual that elected colleagues wouldn't permit it to be broken into two separate things.
Yeah.
Because you'd be forcing me to vote against both. If
Yeah.
I chose that I disagreed on one part, you're negating my right to support you
Yeah.
in one area.
Yeah.
It would appear to be a little unhelpful to yourself, but
Yeah, so it would work. I
I
think.
just wanted to understand the separation.
Oh, okay.
Out if there was something
Yeah.
significant between moving them out, but I take your point. Quite happy for a separation.
Great, thank you for your patience. Okay, great. Ewan, was there any more? No. Thank you. Councillor Kesh, I'll come to you in just a second because I just want to ask a couple of quick questions. When we changed Bridge Street to Anzac Parade and Sappermore Jones from, what was it called originally? Marlborough Place or something, wasn't it? Marlborough Place, yeah. Was that under the same policy?
I understand it was, yes.
So what kind of scrutiny, did it go through the same process, same scrutiny?
I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not asking you to
Yeah.
pass judgment on the, the obvious, but,
I understand it did go through the same process, but I'm certainly not privy to
Yeah.
the full process of that one, to be honest with you.
oh, it was member driven, right?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
Anzac one was a little bit member driven. I can't remember if
Yeah.
Sappermore Jones might have been tied up with this. process.
Margaret Evans.
Yeah.
But it did coincide with the 100th
Yes, it did, yeah.
anniversary of Gallipoli. So
Yeah,
it was in that
essentially,
same year of major
Okay.
commemoration.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, just make sure that we're all on the same, and we had the Ward Street discussion, it would have been the same policy. So, yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Kish, sorry.
Sorry, I just had one question I'd forgotten about. If the change were to be approved, is there a time frame as to when it would actually happen? Or does it, if we say yes, is it overnight or?
No, it wouldn't be overnight. There would be a process where we would have to then write again to the owners, occupiers of the street to let them know.
Sorry, I
that-
can't hear, I'm
Sorry, I'll speak.
partially deaf.
So there would be a process where staff would then write to the owners and occupiers of Von Tempsky Street, for example, notifying them of that particular change, and then there would be obviously a process of changing signs, etc. So it wouldn't be overnight, no.
So do they get adequate time to sort themselves out,
Addresses.
Oh, look,
Yeah.
I think from staff perspective, you'd give them the time that they require to
Yeah.
do so.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. My other question is around this being a reasonably, could be really good, could be really bad, and I'm trying to stack it in favour of whatever happens being positive. So regards to the signage on the street, do we have any intention of doing anything on the street regards the name change, or is it only going to be in the park?
Well, there's no reason why we couldn't do something that's on the streetscape as well. We do in other areas, like near Ward Street, there's interpretation there that's not directly on a reserve, so
Yeah.
we could look at doing something. There is informal interpretation around the place as well, in different areas, so.
I think that's part of the recommendation, Councillor Bunting, in the sense that staff would then investigate those options, including all of the options that you may wish to put forward in terms of on the street, off the street, in the park, however that we may bring them back to this table for conversation and agreement.
Okay, yeah, I think the recommendation is a little bit stronger than just investigate as well, isn't it? I think it's actually get on and do it. But-
work with the partners and
Yeah.
do that.
Okay, no, all right. You get what I'm going with that, yeah. Thank you. Okay, all right. Good Lord, we've got to the end of the questions. So do we have a motion which will be voted on separately in two parts? So,
Well, yeah, you've got the amendment from.
no, I haven't seen that yet, actually. You want to? Yes.
Okay, so it's the same as the staff's on page 92, other than C, approves the application to add the name Pu Tiki Tiki to co-name the street Pu Tiki Po Tiki Tiki / Von Tempsky. So I wanted
Okay.
Po Tiki Tiki to come first.
So just so you're aware of that one, you remember Mr McMichael quite clearly said if we came up with a dual name option, he would withdraw his application altogether. That's what I heard. Was that what I heard? Okay, all right. So you're aware of that if we voted to make a dual name of Von Tempsky Tiki Tiki,
Yep.
he would withdraw his application to get it renamed.
Well, ultimately, I guess he's got that fundamental right.
Yeah.
So we do our process. We move motions and amendments.
Yep.
And then if he's unsatisfied, he has the right to withdraw his application.
Okay.
And then I guess we as a council at some later stage, either an elected member could choose to bring it back. So I'm relaxed by that.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, just so everyone knows. So you knew. Yeah, great. Thank you.
No, so far I don't have a seconder, so I'm flying on my own here unless somebody's willing.
Second it, Jeff. Okay, thank you. I'm still looking at the
Oh, and sorry, staff, in terms of D, I don't want to investigate options of appropriate inclusive. I want us to commit to inclusive interpretation material with liaison with Mana Whenua. So I'm not wanting to investigate it, I'm wanting to do it.
So same as the other guys with this. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, that's clear. So could we see those, please, government staff? You haven't emailed those out, have you? No.
And my apologies, staff, I mean, I've just done this on the fly.
It's okay. That's what they're very, very good at. Thanks, guys. So do we have, what he lost?
Process.
Yep, sure.
Reading, and on councillor Wilson's amendment then, it would then be would it have to come back to council? Because it would then be under the policy, as I read it, would be a proposal from an elected member. So would it have to come back?
This one wouldn't be a
Or-
proposal from an elected member, though. This would be from the.
Well, it would, it would if Mr McMichael withdrew his application.
Yeah, it would have
So
to come back
then does it
separately.
come back? Because is this a recommendation to council?
Yes.
No, this is actually a decision.
Oh, is
It's a
it?
decision.
Good Lord.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
We're not good at making those.
Hey, I know.
We're not usually good at making those.
Well, watch this space.
feels to me like
So,
it would have to come.
It would have to come, well, okay, I'll grant and.
Information that Mr McMichael
Well,
will actually
yeah,
withdraw.
That's kind of
before
where,
we
what I'm
jump
thinking
ahead
about.
and
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that we
yeah.
need to-
But it is a factor in your decision making. So.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
but I
that's
think
okay.
with no formal notification, that, I just feel that we're jumping far ahead. If Ian, gave us a piece of paper and we had something in writing, I don't know if we'd actually need that though, Grant, to say, I will withdraw if you decide this.
It's just, I'm basing that on what I
I
heard him
guess
say
we
today.
have his application says
Yeah.
that really, doesn't it,
Yeah.
without saying it?
Grant and Helen, you've had a bit of a power?
The only point I'd make is that the application is on the face of it an application to make this change. Therefore, the decision in front of you is to either agree that change or not agree that change.
However, we have an amendment, which is quite above board, that puts up another option of a dual name. And then, as you suggest, the process would take its time and come back again probably. Yeah, okay. I think, look, we're all armed with the same knowledge in that respect, so it's all above board.
Apologies, if I can just interrupt for a moment, it would be that we would need to decline the application, and we would likely need to bring it back as an elected member supported application.
Okay, so sorry. Expand on that?
Yes, so if we were wanting to do the other option of renaming it the dual name, just because that's not the intent of the application, that's not what the application says. So we'd have to decline the application as it stands, and then we'd have to have an elected member bring it back as their own suggestion.
And Ian would get his deposit back, obviously.
No.
No, it wouldn't. So you're saying there's a non-refundable deposit that he's put through?
Yeah.
Okay.
Funds already been spent.
Declined.
Okay.
Okay, it would,
But should he, I'm sorry, don't mean to labour this one and ring it out, but I want to get this right. Should he come back and say, okay, we'll go for a dual naming, would that be a separate application? Because,
Could be an amended application.
okay, all right.
Would he need to pay again though?
That's what I'm getting
for an
at.
amendment?
Would just be,
I wouldn't think so.
okay, would be expedient. Okay.
so just for clarity, Chair, am I, basically, are you saying that I've got to remove my amendment?
No, you do your stuff.
So sorry, I'm just double checking for clarity myself. It's my understanding that we would need to decline the application itself and then have it come back. So I would remove the amendment as it would just be, do we approve the application or are we declining it?
Understood. So really you're saying our option is
Take it
to
or
either
leave it.
vote for it or vote against it. Because by voting against it, we're declining it.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, that makes it easy. So I'll withdraw my amendment, if you're telling me I can't vote with my amendment.
Okay.
So I-
That's all right. Look, if this seems clumsy, I make no apology. We just want to get this right. Okay. So thank you, Ewan, for your understanding there.
That was my fault.
Yeah, that's it. All right. So we have a motion on the table which will be voted for in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different parts. Tapora, would you like to explain your motion?
But before I do though, on the basis that we've withdrawn the amendment, there's still the wish to separate.
Yes, please.
Because am I still reading?
You don't have to read it out, but
So that's two pieces in there. There's the,
Mr Chair, you would debate it all at once and you'd
Yes.
simply move A and B, and then you would move C, D and E separately.
yes, that's right.
Yeah. So everything stays, but you would just move A and B, and so we vote on it, and then you move C.
I don't see one, oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry.
I know I see it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had my glasses on, Carmen.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I was looking.
Darn. I was doing well until you put your glasses back on.
Okay. So, right, so A's received the report. B is Dawson to Te Wehinga. C is Von Tempsky to Putiki Tiki, and then the rest is the consultation. And
Kapai.
okay.
It's in there.
I don't know if you actually need to explain the
I
motion.
don't
so
need
if you
to
want just
explain,
launch
and
it,
it's really just a,
Yep.
this morning, Tuku Roirangi Morgan addressed us as the chair for Te Ara Taura, the executive arm of Waikato Tainui, and gave really good clarity in terms of supporting Von Temsky Street being changed to Putikitiki and Dawson Park being given a name of Te Wekinga Park. Simple task was what he said at the end of the day. This is a simple task. Ian McMichael has made an application. He's followed a process based on a policy that we have at the moment. There are questions today to staff about whether or not anything untoward was about that application, and there is nothing untoward. So we've followed a process, and that's what I want to point out. The motion reflects that a process was followed, and let's just follow through on that at the end of the day. It's a simple task. Go for the change or not. Let's not get caught up in the dual names. We know that that's not in there now, one, because it's not a standard, but actually it's something that Waikato Tainui don't support at all. The funding's been paid for it. Cultural sensitivity is why this application has come about. He's followed the process. 3 residents oppose, but by and large, the greater number support that. Simple task.
Thank you, Te Pora. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Street names connote historic people and events, but they're much more than just a historical footnote. When you put someone's name on a street sign, it's a way of honouring and elevating them above others. It also implies that we condone and celebrate their actions. The question today is not whether Von Temsky is someone we should remember. The question is whether he is someone we should be honouring. The assertion that changing a street name is some kind of attempt to rewrite or erase history is flawed. There are plenty of people who have played an extremely influential role in shaping our collective history and whose actions we abhor. We haven't put their names on street signs, and I don't think would ever contemplate it. So why is this different? One of our submitters this morning, Tuku Morgan from Waikato Tainui, talked about the despair, anguish and injustice connected to this issue, and that this street name commemorates Von Temsky's role in the invasion of the Waikato. Is that something that we want to commemorate? We can use interpretive signage on the street to tell the story of Von Temsky. We can say that this was what the original street name was, and this is why we've changed it. This would give people a lot more information than what a single street sign gives right now. There are books, documentaries, information online and podcasts, that all tell the story of Von Temsky. That's a lot more informative than a street sign, and that information is all fully accessible to the public right now. Naming a street after someone, on the other hand, goes well beyond simply recording history. I also think it's important we don't just talk about what we're taking away here. This is an opportunity to revive original place names on this whenua and to give the street a name that reflects the features of the land that the street is on and the taonga that lived there. We need to do a lot better in this city at telling the stories of mana whenua and respecting our original place names. The name has a much closer relationship to the land that the street's on than Von Temsky Street does. And I think this will be a real gain to the community. Street names are extremely visible. We should feel proud of where we live, and we should be able to connect and feel proud of the names of our streets that we live on. There has been significant support from the businesses on the street for the street name to be changed, and I think that's extremely positive. While not everyone is going to be in support, that's democracy. What is going to make the biggest impact on people's well-being today? That's the question we should be asking, and in my view, it's to be changing the street name. Kia ora.
Thank you, Sarah. Take a breath. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Mark. I'm going to be consistent on this matter in every other name change that comes along. And I'm going to be consistent on every statue or monument that is debated about change. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. Councillors, we can't escape history. We can't cancel it. Some of history is amazing and wonderful. Some is brutal, ugly, unthinkable, inhuman, but it is history. And although Councillor Sarah waxes lyrical about the importance of differentiating a street name of celebrating someone's history or name, I would say to you, when you look at what happened back in those times, they were unforgivable by today's standard. They were unforgivable under today's lens, but they occurred. And at some stage in this city's history, the name was used, and I don't think we focus on what we should be focusing on, which is a unified future. This premise that we're going to be able to rectify all of this historical injustice of the past by going back and ripping out or cancelling monuments, street names, is going to somehow right the wrongs. I think you're miscalculating. I think you're being divisive, and unnecessarily so. It doesn't work when you try to cancel history. You would do better by putting up some interpretive information on von Tempsky, highlighting the atrocities and what had occurred. So I'm sitting here as an average Kiwi, and I hear in public submissions like today, white separatists that were overseeing multiple crimes, murder, genocide. How is that sort of narrative constructive to moving forward as a united New Zealand? So I'm going to be consistent. History we can't rewrite. History has to be articulated. Both sides of the argument have to be made. We can't cancel it. So I don't intend to support this name change, nor any other name change, nor any removal of any statue. But I celebrate bilingualism, and I celebrate mana whenua celebrating and putting their own memorials and describing their views of the world, because that is a partnership, not cancelling our history.
Thank you, Ewan. Councillor Rob.
Chair, and look, I'm going to continue the history lesson, but slightly different vein to my good friend Councillor Wilson. When I was a teenager attending Hamilton Boys High School and studying history, I remember the master, who then was a Mr. W. Craig, telling us that our past is our history and we cannot change it. From Hamilton Boys High, I trotted off to Auckland University, where I studied history, and there Professor Keith Sinclair, who was a noted Māori academic, said we should never erase our past, neither the good or the bad. The bad will always be a lesson for us never to repeat. Both Keith Sinclair and Michael King have written books on the Māori Wars, and they have a slightly different approach than Dr. O'Malley had. And I'm remembering the words of Mr. Morgan this morning. We must never forget. And we must never forget if we look at how mature the rest of the world is. If you've ever had the opportunity to look at some modern day examples. If you've been to Auschwitz or Belsen, those camps within our history reveal the absolute horror. And we had there a brand new nation, a brand new Jewish nation, who strongly insisted on the Allies and the new German government not to bulldoze those camps, but to keep them there as a memory. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity, when I travelled to Phnom Penh, to visit S21, which was the torture camp that was used before the unfortunate 2 to 3 million people who were executed during Pol Pot's regime were taken down the road to the killing fields. And they are still there. And if you've ever been there, you'll see the skulls are piled up in windows, shop windows, for you to see what happened there. It is now not possible to change our history. We must live with it. If the reason for the change today is to try and erase that part of history that we want to forget, then I will not support it. Reminders must remain to ensure that we never forget. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rob. Mangai Oli.
Thanks, Chair Mark. I just want to acknowledge the work of Ian McMichael in leading this kaupapa. Also acknowledge the verbal submission of Tukurorangi Morgan, Chair of Te Aratara this morning. Phrase that he used that resonated and stuck with me was Waikato Tainui's past is a past filled with despair and anguish. And if we look at the research from Dr. O'Malley that speaks of Von Tempsky's involvement in Angiawhia, in fact his references from Von Tempsky's memoranda of the New Zealand Campaign 1863 and 1864, where he and his men were beside a burning whare and a man came out with his arms up in gesture of surrender. He was shot by some of the men, and the remaining inhabitants, including a young boy, were tortured to death. That happened on the 21st of February 1864, and I would suggest that definitely isn't acceptable by today's standards, and I'll probably debate that, would strongly debate that wouldn't be acceptable by the standards of the 21st of February 1864 either with many people. I reflect on Wiremu Puki's submission as well, where he talked about Te Wehenga, where the people buried in that cemetery or Urupa were disinterred or dug up to make way for a road, and that some of those bones were children. And interesting to note the lack of cognitive dissonance around the table. I obviously accepted that, but if you think about that actually happening, how horrific that would have been for the parents and relations of those children and the other people who were disinterred. I think both events are abhorrent and sad, and we can't erase that history at all. And it definitely talks to a past that is filled with despair and anguish. Putitiki, I think, is a beautiful name. And, we've all been in Jubilee Bush, and it's great to think of how that bush would have extended once up to the university, feeding Kereru and I think Huia that Wiremu talked of. And, of course, Clawlands, the design on the outside of Clawlands talks about the birds, the colour of the birds as they fed in that part of the bush. I think, we can't change history, and I don't think this recommendation is asking to do that. I think, though, if it goes some way to reducing the despair and anguish of the past, then I strongly support the motion and urge councillors to as well.
Thank you, Ollie. Some great speeches today. Thank you. Councillor Jeff, big pardon, Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Thanks, Chair Mark. Look, I'm pretty sanguine about Dawson Park. It all seems to have almost sort of gained that name by default. But I'm not supportive of renaming Von Tempsky Street. And some might interpret that as some sort of endorsement of Von Tempsky's actions. If they do take that view, then that's on them, because that's not my intent at all. No one denies injustices that have occurred in our history, and there should be, and there is, a significant process underway for reparation through the Waitangi Tribunal, compensation, etc. So I would challenge the assertion that I heard from a submitter today that significant effort isn't going in to right those wrongs. It most surely is. And I'm up for adding to the story rather than eliminating it as if it never existed. I'm much more supportive of adding to it, of reflecting everything that's happening, adding the layers on. So that's why I was supportive of dual street names, as Councillor Wilson originally suggested. So let me emphasise, you'd be stupid to dispute that Von Tempsky caused Māori hurt. But Hamilton is a community trying to move together, to move on. I'm not a believer that extinguishing signs of our history is helpful in this way. And listening to a submitter's accusations of white supremacy and white privilege this morning, that's just not going to do nothing but divide this community. And I'm not going to go down this route. And frankly, I'm tired of it, and I don't think I'm alone. And what I'm hearing from that submitter is someone picking selective atrocities. Von Tempsky did some terrible things, very bad things, but I hate to complicate it. But bad things happened right throughout these wars. Pākehā versus Māori, Māori versus Pākehā, Māori versus Māori. Von Tempsky was many things. He was a reporter, he was an artist, an adventurer, he was a potent warrior, and he was a terrible brute. But he's woven into the fabric of our history. Just as Chief Te Kuti is, another incredible character who lived an amazing life full of danger, full of injustices towards him, full of bravery at times and clever strategy. But Chief Te Kuti was responsible for probably just as many slaughters of women and children as Von Tempsky, and I'm quite happy to go through them all, but I haven't got time. So, and Te Kuti Park backs onto my property in Grandview Heights, but I'm not here baying for the name to be removed forever. It's part of our history. So I think we have to be careful that we don't handpick selective atrocities to build a case on why a memory of a name must be changed, and that's what's happening here today. We add layers to our history. That's what we should do. Add a name to a street name. To me, that's a better approach. I think it's a better route as a whole for the community to go down, acknowledging all sides of history, not cancelling them, and actively commemorating them. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ms Southgate is just going to speak, but you go.
I think Ryan was before me.
Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, Ryan. Forgot about you. I can see the top of your head there, which is fortunately all the same colour as opposed to that photo on Facebook. But
take my breath away, mate. Look, I'm still forming my thinking. I agree largely with Ewan in this concept of cancel culture. I mean, I think a lot of that is, and Rob makes a good point as well about these things are reminders of us, and I think we've got to be very careful that we don't take these things away because we can't erase it, we can't change it. I guess for me, I don't want to open up a can of worms with this, but I think it's quite nuanced because there's a few streets, and this is one of them that's been signalled for a while, has been quite significant in terms of hurting our partners. And it's a central city street, right in the middle of what we know was historically very important to Māori. And one of the things I was trying to ascertain earlier from Wiremu was in America when you have the native Indian, often areas are called, White Cliff or Stands with the Bull or something. And in this case, Tiki Tiki means top knot. And probably that is not a great translation or dual naming. But I think that's the sort of opportunity I'd like to do where you have true dual meaning, English and Māori. But having said that, I think in terms of partnership, in terms of this being in the heart of the city, and the fact that this has been canvassed by a non-Māori and has significant support up and down the area, I think we can achieve a partnership thing without creating fear that this council's gone mad and this council's gone woke and this council's gone cancer culture, because I don't want to sign up for that. But I think we've got to look at each case with its own merits And I think in this case, I'm leaning towards supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Mayor Paula.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I want to start by thanking Ian McMichael for his work here. It's very brave of him to step up and take this on. But he did that because he's absolutely dedicated 100% in his heart to the cause behind this. There's always a balance to be had when we start reversing decisions. I'm aware of a couple of things. The majority of the inhabitants, in particularly the big businesses in Von Temsky Street, support the name change. And I do note that 3 of the residential submitters do not, for reasons that they've named around keeping history and accuracy. I don't doubt the accuracy of the history that we've been shared. I'm not a historian, but I've heard it from numerous historic sources, and I'm quite sure that what they have told us about Von Temsky is correct. So that's one thing. In terms of history, I don't want to erase the past either. I'm quite keen for the story around Von Temsky and others to be told. And those conversations will be uncomfortable at times as we confront them. And I've never shied away from that. We've talked about the need for those conversations. So I don't want to erase the past. What I do want to do, however, is to help heal a cultural wound. I'm aware that Waikato Tainui, Thorwalk, Ngāti Wairere did not instigate the proposed change. As Ryan said, a community gentleman instigated it based off what he learned about history. However, those Māori parties do support the change for reasons of cultural sensitivity, no greater than reasons of cultural sensitivity, because of reasons of cultural harm, the harm they feel to their spirit and well-being. I noticed today we're going to be talking later about Heipo Manawa Ora, a strategy that we were all very excited about, and we may have some discussion on the specifics within it today, but we were committed to making a difference to the well-being of Māori in Hamilton, which we know would also enhance the well-being of everyone else. In this context, I believe there's a very strong case to change the name of this specific street. It's a very short street with majority support. It will have little, if any, negative impact on the wider community, in my view, but it will have a significant positive impact on Māori. Moreover, I think the change is well supported, and when people do understand through interpretation that we've all talked about supporting why this has occurred, good things will come from that. So I'll be supporting the recommendations today for both the street and the park. I just nearly finished, Mr. Chair. But I will say this does not and should not be seen as me supporting any further name changes for other streets. Each case on its merits, with the taking into account pragmatics and reasons. I do welcome this discussion today, though, Mr. Chair. I hope that this kicks off more discussions of this sort, in which we start to talk about the history of our city. It's time that we do that. We've known for the last 2 years, it's time to do that. We can't be afraid of it, we must do it.
Thank you. The thing I hate about being chair is you have to, it's etiquette to go last, and everyone keeps saying what I was going to say, so darn, I have to keep writing new stuff. Councillor Gallagher?
Look, first of all, obviously I'm going to differ with my good friend Ewan on this issue, one of the issues, but please listen to him around interpretive plaques. I remember at the last election campaign, do you support changing the name of Bryce Street? At the time I said no, but I want a plaque to explain the history of Bryce Street. I'm still waiting, and my new chief executive, who has promised us, please, with your vast budget, let's move to getting that interpretive signing up, because that's about the communication, that's about telling a story. So I'm not wanting to repeat some of the things that have been said previously, and I will acknowledge and respect Councillor Wilson and Deputy Mayor Taylor's contribution to this discussion, which obviously doesn't end today. This will be ongoing. I've listened very closely to the significant landowners and investors in the area, Te Koha Health, the Southern Cross Healthcare, which, as you know, operate the very reputable and well-respected Southern Cross Hospital there, Tesla Consultants, the two midwiferys, I understand, birthing clinics, the Maternal Instinct midwives, and also I'm listening to the community of the Hamilton East Primary School, one of our oldest schools, represented by their democratically elected and appointed board of trustees. So that's, and then Mr McMichael, I respect, you know, he is a significant landowner in the area. So that's, if you like, a local request from significant landholders along that street, acknowledging, as Mayor Paula said, there's different views from two or three others, and that's to be respected. I remember with fondness Bill Craig from Hamilton Boys High School. I also remember another teacher who, to me, I didn't comprehend at the time, way ahead of his time in consciousness, talked about kids dying of malnutrition, of starvation as an outcome of the New Zealand Civil Land Wars, all right? And I didn't comprehend that at the time. And I didn't comprehend at the time the pain and the anguish that lives through generation and generations. And I think it's really beholden on us, if I can say, and I'll try and bring this to a close, that Mangai Te Pora and Mangai Ole have also conveyed to us that the heart and the anguish and the pain, and how this, if you like, relatively small gesture in support of the local landowners in the area can perhaps be a statement of expression. I'll also leave a following thing. In the Federal Republic of Germany, where my son currently lives, they confront their history. They don't airbrush their history out. Every secondary school kid goes to the concentration camps compulsorily to face their history. But I tell you what, you'd be hard-pressed to find any German street in any German city that would have a name after people who are prominently associated with the Third Reich or fascism, okay?
Thank you,
So I'm just trying to say there's a kind of a balance. They know history's not perfect, and in this case, this is the one street which I think has huge significance to our fellow citizens, as represented by Manga Te Pora and Ole's contribution today.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kish.
Look, this street, it was named in 1906. So I think it's safe to say that none of our current Hamilton residents
City councillors.
city councillors were around or fit into this
You had to
street
go there,
being
didn't you?
named. I didn't say it. I didn't. And at the time that the street was named, you know, it wasn't open for community feedback or anything like that. The name, it's hurtful to some people. So I think let's just change it and move forward. Most of the people who work and live on the street are happy to change it. The applicant, he's followed process and he's followed this policy. You know, my people, we were put on ships. We were shipped all over the world as indentured laborers, which is a fancy word for slavery. And my people were starved, they were raped, they were killed. We can't change what happened, and it is unforgivable. But we can remember, we can teach, and we can learn from the wrongdoings of others. And if I had the opportunity to change a name that's hurtful to me and my people, I'd take it. I'd change it. By changing a name, I don't think we are erasing history. Nothing can erase history. We carry that with us. In fact, I think this will help to create an opportunity for more people to learn about the past, including the 30-odd% of people who were not born here. We're not rewriting history. I think that we're making a point to our community that we don't support something that's hurtful and we don't support something that's culturally insensitive. And I think that this is us shaping our future instead.
Thank you, Kish. Gosh, this is a good committee. Wow. Yeah. Maxine, Councillor Maxine.
Well, look, hopefully all the good words haven't been said yet, and I look forward to Māngai Te Pora's response after we've all spoken. I'm really puzzled by the fact that not all elected members agree with me on this position, but I guess
Welcome to my world.
you're able to hold a different view, and I respect that. Look, to me, it's as simple as it is to Māngai Te Pora. We've heard the street name causes harm, and we've seen submitters today and the depth of feeling that they hold on these, on this. And it's really clear to be able to see the offence and the hurt that it creates. And our own report furnished by Dr. O'Malley supports that as well. These streets and this area have been known as something else by Ngāti Wairere, the first settlers in the area. So to say that we're cancelling history is very selective. What of those first settlers and the names that they were known by at that time? We don't hear about that. Look, all Hamiltonians in this city deserve to have their well-being considered, respected and upheld. And look, I think we have the chance through this renaming to begin to turn that around. We'll have a chance also to tell the history story in other ways, and those storyboards as a part of this motion is already being suggested. So nothing in my mind is being cancelled, but in renaming the street, a harm and a wrong is being put right. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Maxine. Thank you. Councillor Angela.
Thanks, Chair Mark. There's been some exceptional debate on both sides, like outstanding, and I have swung both ways almost after listening to every person. But the reason we have a policy is to guide decisions, and if we don't like that policy, then we change it, and we've got that coming up at midnight tonight.
Oh, that's what we're staying for.
You know, the debate that I've heard today has been, in my view, has been equally rational and case building for their position. Listening to Councillor Robb's experience overseas of visiting gas chambers that leave the most abhorrent and horrific stories of history there for people to experience and to learn about. That's not being cancelled, it's not being erased, but it's also not being celebrated. And that's what's important to me, and that's what's always been, and I've always been consistent on this, is that when we had the Captain Hamilton debate as well, we never told the story. We never did that. There might have been a different outcome had we done that. Councillor Gallagher has always gone on and on and on about we need the plaques, we need the interpretations, and we've not had that, and that's been to our detriment. But I feel like an imposter sitting here today because I'm not a historian, and I'm also don't feel the harm and hurt by this, but I respect, and what Councillor Naidoo-Rolfe just said, others that do. I won't ever support cancelling things. I don't like that. But I do want us, and the thing that swung me as well today was we did talk about interpretation boards, we did talk about the story, and boy, if nobody knew about Von Tempsky, if this goes through, they're going to know today. And that's actually a good thing. He was a bastard of a human being, excuse my French. People should know that. I didn't know that till we started down this journey. So we're not actually cancelling anything, but we're not celebrating either. My support for this is not future support for every name change that we've got, because if there was no interpretation and no story and no passion going into this, then I wouldn't be so keen on it. But the fact of the matter is, we have a policy. It gives us guidelines to make a decision. We have an application. It met the threshold, so I'm going to support the two motions today.
Thank you, Councillor Angela. I echo Councillor Angela's adoration of the way this has been debated today. Gosh, this is a good committee. This is a really good committee. It's coming out, and that is what these courageous conversations are all about. Councillor Dave often teases me about sitting on the fence, but actually I prefer to think of it as on a case-by-case basis, looking on balance at each individual case. On balance, this to me is actually a really easy decision to make to support this. On balance, in this case, to me, this is really easy. On balance, Anzac Parade was an easy decision to make at the time. On balance, Sappamore Jones was an easy decision to make. And, you know, I haven't researched it, but apparently the Sun still came up the next day. And I have a strong inclination that this, if this goes through, will repeat. The Sun will still come up the next day. History. Or, as I often used to look at the word, his story. His story. How is that told? No one is disputing the Von Tempsky legacy and the unpalatableness of it all. But what is changing in our time is how we tell those stories. In the very early days, they were written on the side of caves. Then they were told verbally. Then they were written down. Then they were put up in street names. Now they're put up in documentaries. And we go online to look at it. You want to go online right now, you want to see what one of the biggest and most disgusting stories is the story of Jimmy Savile. Right? We watched that. It was exposed after he died, what happened. Now look what's happened. I was just Wikipediaing it here. Memorial plaque taken away. His grave taken away and destroyed. Signs on a footpath named Savile View removed. That's the way these are being dealt with over there. Now, I'm not comparing Savile to Von Tempsky at all, but I'm just saying the way we tell our stories is changing. So let's do it appropriately. It's been very, very clear that this is a culturally hurtful representation of history by a significant size of our population. So I think the mature and proper and on-balance thing to do is to move it on. Believe me, no one's going to forget who Jimmy Savile is. And no one's going to forget, and it's not being wiped out, what he did. But the way that story is being told now is more contemporary. No one's going to forget Von Tempsky. No one's going to wipe out or change that history by pulling down a street name. But what we are going to change is the cultural hurt. Like Councillors Hamilton and Councillor O'Leary, it's a case-by-case thing for me. On balance, it's a small population on that street. On balance, most of the landowners and the stakeholders are in support of it. I think, in a reasonably cost-effective way, we can do this right. We can put up the storyboards, we can put up the PO, we can do whatever we can possibly imagine to make this a positive change. Because as Ian McMichael said, it's not all about taking away history, it's about adding pātiki-tiki to the story and putting it back on balance. So on balance, in this case, I'm more than happy and very comfortable supporting this motion. Manga Tapora, you're right to reply.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a great-grandchild of Ngāti Wairere, and so this application and the support for it from Ngāti Wairere is very special. It does get hard, though, being told how to suck eggs on my own history and how I should feel about that, or how Māori should feel about their own history. Cancel culture, or erasing the past, or going a bit rogue, or being storytellers instead of racking things up there. There's two things with the names. Te Wehenga, as Ollie was saying, ancient Ngāti Parikirangi burial site that was cut in half. So the wehenga means to split. that's that there. We can't go and see the history there because all those bones from that burial site have been removed and they were done some time there. Von Temsky was a lot of things. There's many, many things, but the deeds that were done were not good things for my people, nor did it lead to any good outcomes for us. Changing the name of Von Temsky Street and the gifting of the name Te Wehenga will, as Mea Paula said, have a very positive impact on Māori, on iwi, on Ngāti Wairere, on our descendants, your partners that are around the table. We've already made substantial name changes. This is no different. As I said in the beginning, we have an application was made. Our job is a simple task. It's met the mark. You either approve it or you decline it. That's the task here today. There's I'll leave it there, Chair Mark.
Thank you.
That's a decision to be made.
All right. Thank you, Te Pora. Yeah, it's certainly one of the better debates I've seen. I'd agree. Right, so let's take this to the vote now. Can we see the... we're going to vote on these items in small chunks, if you like. Can we have them up there, please, Tyler? Narelle? Anyone? Anyone? There we go. Bueller. Okay, so here we go. We've got... Okay. I think we'll all agree to receive the report. We'll do that by show of hands. Sorry? Yeah. A and B together. All right, so receiving the report and approving the application to name the park on Grey and Dawson Street as Te Wehenga Park, noting that the park is operationally referred to as Dawson Park but has never been officially named. Those in favour? Those against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay. C will be taken separately. Those in favour of approving the application to change the name of Von Temsky Street to Putiki Tiki Street, show of hands, please. Those against, please.
The motion is carried, noting Councillors Wilson, Deputy Mayor Taylor and Councillor Pascoe dissenting.
Okay. Now, are you okay if we put D, E and F together? Yeah. You guys all right with that? Just a little easier on the arms, to be honest. Or does anyone have any intention of... Oh, stuff will go separately. Okay. D, approves for staff to proceed with appropriate and inclusive interpretation signage under the existing budget of He Manawa Ora in partnership with Mana Whenua and Wakata Tainui. Show of hands in favour of that. Those against?
The motion is carried, noting Deputy Mayor Taylor, Councillors Wilson and Councillor Pascoe dissenting.
Thank you. E notes that staff will develop a communications plan to support the naming and renaming, and I'm going to be brave and put them together, and notes that the applications have been managed under the currently operating naming of streets, open spaces and facilities policy.
If we change the policy today, that flicks to the new one, That's what that means?
Yes.
Under the currently operating?
No, it
Stays under this
stays,
one.
so
Yeah,
we're
sorry.
just noting that it is staying under the policy of today.
Good question.
Yep.
Yep. So those in favour of those two items, is up? Okay. Those against?
The motion is carried, noting Deputy Mayor Taylor is dissenting.
Right. Thank you. That was a tricky one. We did good. All right. So moving on now. Well, the plan was to go till... Yeah, the plan was to go till 6, noting that I guess we have to move that we are going to be able to go. So can I put to the group that we go to 6 first of all before we discuss further? Yeah.
I've got to go at 10.
There's a number of us that can't. Why don't we stop here now?
Right. We had this discussion earlier on, and the
Yes, I know.
consensus was we'd go till 6 and then make the decision. Yeah, I really wouldn't mind pushing through it. Okay, yeah, okay, come and lend your voice to what we're going to discuss. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, in advance, I thank Mayor Paula for a slightly larger meeting than she was anticipating in the next council meeting. I would like to say it was, Mayor Paula, do you have any problem with it? Okay. All right, fantastic. Okay, meeting's resumed. So here is the plan, and I'll need you to guide me through procedurally how we enact this. But what we're aiming to do is, we've already moved that HAPO comes to June, okay? Noting that we want to have Hui on it offline beforehand, if that's okay, Mona. We will tackle the Fairfield Park reclassification tonight. The deliberations report on the review of naming of roads, item 13 basically, that will be a recommendation to council anyway, so we are going straight to council with that one. And we'll work out how to do all this on the board shortly, just to make sure everyone's understanding is okay. We will tackle the old boys rugby thing, pardon the pun, tonight, and the celebrating age will be moved to council, the next council meeting, and we will tackle the other item that's left in the publicly excluded.
Chair,
okay.
Stop talking. I'll move item 11.
Second. Okay. No, yeah, that's right. We can do the rest as we go. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Do I have any debate on that? The Fairfield Park reclassification. Yeah. No debate. All right. There being no debate, no right of reply to that stunning debate? No? Okay, so can we have those in favour of the Fairfield Park reclassification? Thank you, staff, for that great work. You've actually done really great work on that already. So. Okay, good.
Motion is carried unanimously.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
I'll move item 14.
Hold on, please. With item 13, now I need to move that goes to council. Is it a procedural motion or is that just...
We're just going
to... Okay, so I will move that be deferred or be discussed and contemplated at the next council meeting, mid-May. Seconded by Councillor Ewan. Those in favour? That's the street naming? Number 13.
The motion is carried unanimously.
I'm not sure if you're scratching his head or voting. I'm not sure. Okay. All right, old boys. Now, there may be some questions on this one, which we are taking this seriously. Thanks, Angela. It's a great report. I will introduce this by saying that this is the result of a lot of discussion with old boys, and I will also want to thank staff for the way they have handled this. Sean, your team's done a great job on this. That's the introduction. There are some questions, though. It's been moved and seconded. There are some questions from Councillor Robb. So, Sean, this might be on you, I think.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say we have Karen Kwok from the community group and also Ben Slatter from H3 on the screen, and they can answer any questions.
Fantastic. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of being unpopular for asking questions on this, I will proceed. I've only got three questions so far. The first question, the lease and the lease payment. Have we been, in the context of the negotiations, have we been made fully aware of the various commercial activities that the club carries out on the site? And are we in agreement with those?
I can answer that if you like.
Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Yes, so the commercial activities that are in the lease agreement and that I've sought approval for are all the commercial activities that I'm aware of that the club has submitted as part of their lease application, and we've assessed each one.
Yep.
And we're happy with the agreements.
Okay, thank you. Second question then is the paltry $2,700 that they pay each year for the lease. Have we, in anticipation of this renewal, undertaken an exercise to what the costs are to Hamilton City Council? And I'm thinking of my very short term around the table here. where we had to undertake some quite significant resowing of rugby fields, and I think there's been a number of other costs that council have borne, which we had at those various times understood to have been the responsibility of the club. Have we done any exercise that tries to measure off, you know, what the cost to the ratepayer is of funding this lease?
So Karen, are you able to answer that question?
I think Chad's probably, sorry, Chad. I think Ben's, Chad's actually left the building, but Ben is probably best placed to answer that in terms of their use of the grounds for the Sevens, I think is what you're talking about there, Rob?
Yeah, it is. I think it goes back to that time, or it might have been back to the rugby. I think it was the Rugby World Cup. It was for some training grounds, wasn't it, for one of the major tournaments, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Rob. So what was the question, sorry?
Oh, the question is around an attempt to identify what costs the council have incurred in recent times. And it may be that I'm talking myself to an answer that you might have sorted out in this lease, that we don't end up having to fund those costs in future if they are the rightful liability of the lessee.
I see. Yeah, that's correct. That's where we have got to with the conditions for this lease, is that they would be looking after their ground as such. Yeah, not us, and that wouldn't incur cost to us. We would make good when we use the ground and ensure that it's up to standard. Yep. But there wouldn't be any ongoing assistance for their ground.
So are they aware of that requirement, that they're aware of what their obligations are in terms of maintaining the assets that are leased to them?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And my last question really is around the level of subsidy, and I popped this question in because I thought we might have also been potentially going to discuss the Celebrating Age Centre. And I just wondered whether, and this might be a question, Helen, of you, are we at a particular time now that we should be reviewing the extent of the subsidy that we give to community groups? It's quite clear with the Celebrating Age that we've got a worn-out building that we are funding 85% of, and the amount of lease that we've got in this instance is relatively small in relation to the particular operation size of the rugby club.
I think it's important to note too in terms of, Hamilton Old Boys do own the buildings, so we don't.
Yes, I understand that. Yes. Yep.
There has been a lot of work done on the in terms of community leases and how those are subsidised or not. If this council wants us to review that, I'm not sure the last time that was done. Karen?
Yeah, so 2018 during the policy review, we reviewed rents, and so the next time it's due to be reviewed is when the policy is reviewed again.
I understood the 85% had been in since about 2014, and we didn't review that. We reviewed the rents, the value of the properties, as opposed to a potential change in the level of subsidy. And that was my question, was around whether or not we should be considering, and I'm not saying that we say yes to that today, but whether or not we should have on the work plan a paper to come back to council suggesting whether or not that 85% subsidy is still appropriate given the costs.
Sure.
The ongoing costs to the ratepayer.
I understand. So we'll take that as an action to have a look at that and come back with a
I think it's due to be reviewed in 2023. Normally these policies review at least every 5 years. If you want that to happen sooner, but we have reviewed this policy on I was going to use the word numerous, on several occasions in recent times.
On the subsidy level, have we?
Oh, on a whole bunch of different things.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all
I'd
right.
have to refresh my memory on.
Okay, well, maybe
Yeah.
just as an
We'll
action.
take it as an action and come
Yeah,
back if
but
there's
we can
a-
have a look at that.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thanks,
Thank you,
Chair.
Rob.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
that. Councillor Donovan?
Oh, hello.
Welcome.
I hope thank you, Chair. I hope I've read it and interpreted it right, but Hamilton Old Boys are asking for a 33-year lease.
Yeah, that was the question I was going to ask.
Okay,
And we've got in here 15.
okay.
Right,
Why are we so adverse to a 33-year lease?
Our policy is 15 years. It is the maximum term,
Have we ever stepped outside of that?
not currently.
Yeah.
Karen?
So for Corte Pacifica, we did because of such a large investment into the site, an $11 million investment. But that was an anomaly. So 15 years is our maximum under our policy. But we believe that's a good period of time for the current lease. And that allows us the opportunity at 15 years to look at the current agreement and see if we need to make any changes to the current agreement at that time.
Was a 15 plus 15 ever considered?
No, we don't have a right of renewal option in our community occupancy policy. So what that means is at the end of 15 years, I'd need to apply for a new lease and we'd assess it at that time.
Yeah.
When the policy was formulated, it was elected members who wanted us to keep our options open under a shorter period of time rather than getting locked in for 33 years.
Yeah.
Because we had some historic issues with some peppercorn rentals and things like that. So there was a lot of debate about it at the time, and that's where council at the time actually decided upon just to, but it doesn't mean to say that we're not open to applications prior to the 15 years being up, even though there's no right of renewal. But if the lessees have actually performed well, then generally we ask them to apply earlier than that 15-year period, and actually then we generally look upon good tenants favourably going forward. My experience is I don't think we've actually ever exited anyone. We've just renegotiated terms, even if they've maybe haven't been as good as some other tenants.
Okay, I can see that, and maybe my next comment might be more for debate, so I might just hold off.
Okay. Yep. Good. You raised some good points. So are you happy with the answers you've got, though?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Except, are we having pizza?
All right. So, you said it needs pizza. Okay. All right. No more questions. You asked the question I wanted to ask, so that's great. Don't have to do that anymore. Now we have the motions up here. That's been moved and seconded already by gentleman to my left, Ewan and Ollie. Is that right? Great. So just have a good look at that recommendation, though. We received the report. We approve the new community group lease under Reserves Act, yada yada, to Hamilton Old Boys, yada yada yada, for the land area of yada yada. No, it's just that was a small cultural translation. Yada. Oh, it's at my 21st. Allotment of okay. So the term is 15 years. There's the rent in accordance with our community occupancy policy. The lease includes approval to operate a bar. There are special conditions. The 5 yearly reviews. Okay. The field and car park use, noting that is different to the previous arrangement. C, that we approve the continuation of the current subleases to Turn and Gymnastics Circle Incorporated for John West Indoor Training Centre. So that's and Hingkada Judo Club. Everyone know where that is? Yep. Okay. Approve the continuation of the commercial hireage to Med-Train Waikato for the use of the social lounge space. And Eat Cetera Limited for use of the kitchen. And notes that Hamilton Old Boys and Sports Club have plans to undertake a minor extension to the indoor training centre to develop women's changing rooms. That's all there is, isn't there? So there is quite a bit to that, but if you're happy for me to move it, or to be
One
moved-
quick question.
Oh, sorry.
One quick
Ryan.
question, Chair.
Yeah, mate.
Sorry if I could just sneak it in there. While we're so inflation hot at the moment, Karen, does our policy allow for inflation? Sorry, you're on mute.
Yes, so that's considered when we review the rent in line with the policy. So that's essentially what happened last policy review. We reviewed all the land and building rental rates for the square metre rates, and that's how we had rent increases, but the percentage wasn't reduced.
So it kind of answered my question, but kind of not. Does our inflation rate, does it change year by year, or are you saying you try and factor it in?
Yeah, not year by year. It was factored in when we did the rent review in 2018.
Is there an opportunity, because obviously when we review this in 5 years, it'll be 9 years. Is there an opportunity at the 5-year review point to adjust to that?
Yes, I believe it's the policy's due for renewal within the next year, so we'll look at it then.
Okay, so the policy is renewed for a year, but does that mean it will automatically apply to all contracted policies?
No, because the way the leases are written, it's only upon a change to the rent in the policy. So we can only increase rent when we change the policy.
Okay,
because the policy sets out the rental.
Maybe I'm not helping, but I'm not getting a clear sense of, can we adjust the rate based on inflation in 5 years' time if we've changed the policy? Because it seems like we're fixing the price for 5 years or 15 years.
So the question, Councillor Ryan, is that if we change the rate after we've approved the lease and then we review the policy and change the percentage, can we then change it on the existing lease in line with the policy?
So the
does it give us flexibility to keep it fairly current with, the current?
Yearly. It gives us yearly reviews in the leases.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
It's like we shoulder rub that one. Isn't it? Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Is that the end of your questions, mate? Yep, beauty, cracker. Okay, so all of that has been moved in one big blob. Question, sorry, Deputy Mayor. Jeff?
No, I was just wanted to say something in debate.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yep, go ahead.
Two questions. Just coming back to the earlier query from Mark, they have agreed now to the 15 years rather than their wish this morning for the 33 years.
Their desire is for 33 years. We've been clear that our recommendation is for 15.
But I read this report that this is the end agreement in terms of the long period of negotiation between the two parties.
Yes.
So they're accepting that it will be 15 years, but would like 33.
Correct.
Okay, and one last question. The subleases that we've approved, are they at, presumably that rental income comes into the Old Boys Club? Is that at market rates or do they pass on the 85% subsidy?
Karen, are you able to answer that?
Yeah. So the group sets the rental. Our expectation under the lease is that. Yes, yep. So Hamilton Old Boys receives the rent and they set the rate. Our expectation is that it is at a community rate rather than a commercial rate, but it is up to them what that amount is.
And do you scrutinise that in any way?
I have a look at it. I ask them for the agreement and look at the agreement. But it's up to them to set it.
And are you happy that it would, with your experience on, comparing community versus commercial rates. Are you happy that there is a reflection in what they're charging to suggest it is lower than market value?
Yes, so there's only two that are the subleases, which are community groups, which is Turn and Circle and the Judo Club.
Yep.
So both of those are lower than a commercial rate. The Judo, in fact, I don't think they pay, they pretty much have a peppercorn rent.
Okay, thank you. No,
Good
thanks,
questions.
Chair.
Thanks, Rob. No,
Thanks,
it's
thanks
with you.
Karen.
Okay, now it was moved by Councillor Ewan, who's since left, so how do we handle that?
It is still, it was taken on the table at the time that he was in the room,
Okay.
and therefore.
So
perfectly
Ollie,
fine.
I'll let you go first if you wish, and reserve a right of reply for you.
Sure, I think Hamilton Old Boys are one of the oldest inner city clubs since 1930, really well organised. I note, you know, their commitment to the stadium being built and relinquishing their perpetual rights. I know in the past the relationships between council and Hamilton Old Boys haven't been as healthy. It looks like now there's been a lot of good healthy debate, good negotiation, and sounds like this morning they were happy with those conditions. I think they're pretty extensive and provide flexibility for council to host major events and provides good options for that. So I think it's a good common sense motion.
Thank you, Ollie. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, look, I want to congratulate staff here because it has been, I think, a challenging relationship over the years. And when this issue arose with the lease last year, on the face of it, I looked at it and I thought we were quite a distance apart, and I was beginning to see some issues, possible issues arising, and it was a bit of a worry. So I just think some really good work's gone on to come to an agreement here, and congratulations to all the staff involved.
Well
Great
done.
work.
Well spoken, Jeff. Totally agree. Councillor Donovan.
Thank you, Chair. Bunty, I promise I'll try not to make any references to my former rugby career, but please forgive me if I do. Everyone here today has spoken passionately about things that they believe in, and rugby is one of those things that's passionate, very close to my heart. Sarah just said to me before, Councillor Thompson actually said, let the community know how you feel. So I'm going to let you know how I feel about rugby. Really, really happy with the work that's been done. I can see a compromise has been reached. I think 33 years would have been acceptable to hand over. I still can't quite get my head around that because that club's been around since the 1930s and isn't going anywhere. At this stage, rugby still remains our #1 sport in New Zealand. Look, they are a well-run club. It hurts to say that because I played for an opposition club and on the weekend we played them and they beat us and robbed us of our hard-earned victory that we should have got. But they're looking for certainty, and a business runs best when it's got that around them. And while they're a community club come sports association, they still have to run it like a business. And so you look for those things that give you that certainty, and for them it'll be the whole what caterers they can get in, what other subleases they can do, and whatnot. And I also think that, and it was mentioned that we did step outside the realms. Granted, it's for a much larger dollar value in the Cote Pacifica, but I would argue that a club like Old Boys carries a lot of weight to its presence and has a lot of mana about it, and therefore deserves to be given equal opportunity and support to go forward. So I will say in 1992 when we played them in the grand final at Rugby Park, I did kick the winning goal on the rugby.
Don't make me fact check that.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Mark. Thank you for speaking so passionately.
No, that was
good to hear.
it was in the Lamb Wars or something. Yeah.
Nice to have you on the board. Ollie, do you want to reply or?
Yes, Chair, Mark, thank you. Would like to write a reply further in vain to Councillor Donovan's impassioned speech about his love for rugby. The only thing I like about Hamilton Old Boys, for the record, is when the team that I'm in or a team that my kids are in or a team that I'm coaching beats them. Doesn't happen as often as I would like because they are so well organised. But on a serious, more serious note, they're a fantastic example of a community in Hamilton. and a community that's been around since 1930, a strong, well-established community, and I think it's great that we're working together and we're able to support that community going forward for the next at least 15 years.
Good stuff, great stuff. Thank you very much. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against?
Councillor Hamilton, can I just confirm that you were in favour?
Yep.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Well done. Thanks, Sean. Please pass our regards on to the staff who've worked so hard on that. Thank you. All right, I'll move that we go into the publicly excluded, seconded by, sorry? What do I have to do?
Just do the celebrating age that got moved back into open, that we need to defer.
Oh, we haven't deferred that yet? Okay, sorry, beg your pardon. Before we do that, I'll move that we defer the celebrating age discussion to the open section of the council meeting in mid-May. Do we have a seconder for that? Kesh. She's got to be fast, man, eh? See where the rugby career ended. Okay,
You talked about tackling.
those in favour? Those against?
Carried unanimously.
Martin, you were for, I presume? Yep, great, thank you. All right, now I'll move to exclude the public while we turn off the television machines and things. Could you please tell Māori TV that I'll be out soon, Ollie? Is that right? Are you going out there? The guy with the camera, I'm going to talk with him, but we'll be still about another 5 or so minutes.
Can we just vote on moving into public excluded, please?
Beg your pardon, those in favour of moving to public excluded?
Thank you.
Sorry. And against?